Yeah, folks, listen, the story today is China. Plain and simple, it's all about China, and none of it is particularly good news for President Xi. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the What's Right Show, your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m., right here on News Talk 840 KXNT. So, obviously, we're getting through the tariff mess. And I say mess because it's not clean. Of course it's not. I'm getting your emails, which, by the way, you can email me, sam@whatsrightshow.com. I'm getting your emails. I understand that the market is dropping. I keep saying this on air. Nobody believes me. This is killing me. That's not everything, but my investments are down. Those of you who have 401ks, for example, your investments are down. It has not been the best week, but was this a Black Monday event yesterday? No, it was not. In fact, the NASDAQ ended the day slightly up over where it had started. So look, all of this is, to make a finer point of it, the expected damage from it. Everything that the naysayers have been saying so far has not materialized. So it's time that you not listen to them. I'm not telling you have to listen to me. I'm just saying, some of the people out there who are hand-wringing just simply have a lower tolerance for risk than I think Trump does. And this is very important because it's the tolerance of risk that really maps out where we go from here. Why do I say China's the story today? Well, the trade war with China has escalated, right? Trump has made it abundantly clear that he is engaging in conversations and tariff negotiations with our allied countries. China's not on that list. Trump has spoken to the Japanese prime minister, for example. Japan and the U.S. are moving toward a deal. The same, I believe, is happening in Taiwan, even with the Europeans, with the EU. But China has been left out in the cold. More than 50 countries, according to the Wall Street Journal, have reached out to the White House in recent days, and Trump is returning phone calls. We are having conversations. Now, the deals are going to take a little bit of time because, of course, Trump wants to get maximum leverage from this, and I do believe there is a drive right now to cool off the stock market and to lower 10-year bond yields in order to refinance U.S. debt. I also think that when it comes to U.S. held debt, right, or two biggest owners of that debt, holders of U.S. debt, of long-term treasuries, are, of course, Japan, whom we're making a deal with. Interesting. I bet you that the bonds that Japan holds as part of the negotiation, hey, we will trade with you. We'll give you a zero rate, but we expect you to accept a lower rate on the bonds that you hold on our national debt. It's a forced refinance of sorts. Is that good for you and me? Of course. Does this benefit every living and every future living American? Hell yeah. Do you hear that this is a good thing from anyone in the mainstream media? Of course not, because it's all about criticizing Orange Hitler. So here we go. That's step one. Who's the other holder of long-term U.S. debt? Well, it's China. So the Chicoms have it. And the Chicoms are in actual real trouble. And for me, a litmus test of reading the news today is entirely based on what someone's take is on China and on President Xi. China was screwed before this trade war. China is a net exporter of goods. The U.S. market is not all of China's export market, but it is one of the, if not the largest export market that China has. Without the U.S., China's economy will cease to exist. It is Armageddon. And all China can do is continue devaluing its currency until it reaches the point where it cannot afford to buy things like oil, food, and other industrial chemicals, fertilizer, and the like that they don't produce domestically. I mean, it is beyond bad for China. Now everybody's saying, well, China has a greater tolerance for political risk, given the fact that they're a dictatorship and they don't have to worry about these pesky elections like we have here in the US. Now, a couple of points on this. Number one, President Xi already used up his one get out of jail free card with the Chinese people, and more importantly, with the Politburo, the leading members of the Chinese Communist Party. And he used it up during COVID. If you will recall, President Xi foolishly, and in a way that almost led to internal revolts in the country. In fact, there were flashpoints, actual confrontations during his zero COVID policy. Xi might have been, in the entire world, the biggest shutdown guy. Kind of ironic because their country gave us the virus to begin with. But Xi, if you remember, there were videos where they were literally like locking people in their apartments from the outside, barricading the door. Oh, that family has the pox. They've got the vid. So they came in, police come in and actually affixed, plywood to people's doorways, preventing them from, even leaving, going outside of their apartments. Horrible stuff. And there were revolts, if you will recall. There were actual, honest to goodness flashpoints where Xi was forced to retreat. Now, what do you think, setting aside the human toll of this, the frustration, no doubt, that the people feel over those policies that are not that long ago, and ask yourself what this did to the Chinese economy? Again, you don't have to be an economist to have an opinion about this. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to read peer-reviewed literature. You just need your common sense. Because my common sense on this tells me I saw what even a, by comparison, fairly moderate shutdown did to our economy. I see the kind of damage that it inflicted on my city, for example, Las Vegas. We had nothing compared to what the Chinese did, but it was bad. And it translated into years of ensuing economic pain. And I will say this, we still are not recovered. And some of this difficulty right now in our economy and the imbalance in our economy is caused in part during COVID. Now, so China, right, going back to my point here, China, tolerance for political risk, they've got a dictatorship, right? And people are saying, well, we have elections, they don't, so they can withstand a few years, a decade of suffering and of pain. But you see the Chinese have already had it up to their gills. And forget President Xi for a minute. There are powerful people behind him that matter. There are people within the Chinese socialist communist system that could get rid of him. Now, the one thing that the communists want, I would just, this is common sense, is they want to, all right, maintain power. They want to maintain the perks and the privileges. If you're one of the top 20 Chinese communists, you've got it pretty good. I mean, you're living like a little mini emperor. You've got your fiefdom. You've got billions of dollars. You travel the world in the lap of luxury. You have a life that most people cannot imagine. And they do fear revolution. They do fear their people. They do not want that system to end. And if they've got a president who digs his heels in, I don't know that he has years. I know Trump has 4. Trump has 4 years to make this happen. And I don't know that President Xi has 4 years. I really don't. So it's so that's the thing. I'm telling you what the intent here is, to actually weaken China economically. And by the way, the very same people, and this is important, The very same people that say that they don't want a trade war, neocons, for example, old school Republicans and, kind of the some of the so-called centrist Democrats who are very, very against a trade war under any terms and are constantly quoting Reagan, bringing all this stuff up. These are the people that would dive headfirst into a hot war, into a kinetic conflict. And it's funny how they have no problem. Oh, let's bomb Iran tomorrow. Let's go and let's do it. Let's invade Ukraine and kick Putin's ass. Let's do all this stuff. And those same people will try and go, oh, we can't have a trade war. Now, I'm here. I'm going to can I say the obvious? I do not personally believe that America could easily defeat China militarily. I just don't see it. But I absolutely believe that we can defeat China economically because their economy is a house of cards. And I think all we have to do, right, is just blow on it a little bit, pull out one or two pieces, as Trump is doing, and watch the whole thing come apart. Speaking of the Chinese, an old saying, may you be cursed to live in interesting times. Well, the Chinese right now certainly are living in interesting times. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right Show is brought to you by Sam & Ash. Sam & Ash, the only law firm to trust for your injury case. 702-820-1234 is the number you call because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam & Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
All right, giddy up. Let's get back to it. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Show, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. Email for me with questions, comments, concerns, criticisms. I love the criticisms. Bring that on. Is, of course, sam@whatsrightshow.com. And on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find me at What's Right Sam. So, day, what is this now? 5, 6, 7? No, 5. Well, if we're counting the week, 6. Wednesday. Last Wednesday, the tariffs were announced, so-called Liberation Day. Markets, of course, freaking out, doing what they're doing, and particularly enormous swings in the bond market. And this is, I got to explain to you sort of what happened yesterday, because people are calling it this, basically only 3 times in history has there been such a wild swing in percentages of 10-year yields in the bond market. And all this really means is that traders, people buying and selling, facilitating the transfer of these bonds, have no idea how to price them because they don't know what's going to happen. And there's a lot of people that think of this as some sort of tremendous negative. And I just want to reemphasize the most important point in all of this. That is the uncertainty of things that Trump is leveraging to get the best deal for America and for American workers. Plain and simple. If there was no uncertainty, we wouldn't have these swings. We wouldn't have the fear of God striking at the hearts of our enemies. Now, at the same point in time, of course, people are going to melt down about this here in our country. And I saw, it was so funny, I didn't come across this yesterday, but this morning I saw the Dave Portnoy clip where he's the Barstool sports guy. He's a Trump guy. He voted for Trump. He supports Trump. And he's just melting down. And look, he's an entertainer, right? Portnoy is an entertainer, and I love him. And I admire certainly his business that he's created. But it's just, people are well, listen, there's a guy that trades his stocks. There's a business guy, and he's criticizing Trump. And I'm laughing and I'm going, look, I mean, he's got a surface level understanding of what's going on in the real world. I wouldn't talk about sports. I wouldn't dare. And perhaps Dave Portnoy should stay away from this stuff. Now, what is interesting is there are bond traders and there are portfolio managers, and Bill Ackman is one of them, who are big fans of Trump, who have been melting down. And a lot of what they predicted over the weekend simply did not come to pass yesterday. That's important. I told you last week that this was not going to be as bad as people think. I also told you that it was a necessary pain and we had to stay the course. I did not spend the weekend hand-wringing and second-guessing Trump. And it is astonishing to me that people like Ackman, who are phenomenally bright and certainly far more astute in the matters of high finance, had a completely different take on this to me. That's just one of the, it's an interesting thing. And I believe, again, people always will act in self-interest. And I don't think when you look at these bond guys, when you look at these billionaires, very few of them act outside of their personal self-interest. Elon Musk is a rare find in this regard. And that's, of course, why the entire establishment is fighting to run his name through the mud, to destroy his businesses, to go after him personally, to use any means, including domestic terrorism, to dissuade him from his activities because he doesn't care about money. And people who do not care about money are dangerous to the political establishment that cares only about money, about what ends up in their pocket. So this is where we're at. And look, there's very, very intelligent people out there who were crying and who predicted things that simply didn't happen. Now, where do we go from here? There's going to be further instability until there isn't. And the reason for that is that Trump is deliberately keeping people guessing. If people weren't kept guessing, then our adversaries and even some of our allies with whom Trump is intent on getting an advantageous deal would not be literally begging and on their knees to get some kind of a concession from America, no matter how small. This is how you negotiate. And Trump has figured out something very important, that America has a lot more leverage than any of our previous leaders, political and economic, were willing to accept. And China forever has been taking advantage of us because they know that Americans' tolerance for pain is momentary. One bad day on the stock market, and what are the headlines? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And that's, and so the Chi-Coms can say, well, listen, we're just going to, we're going to screw you. And they know the Americans will be so keen politically, for example, the Biden administration, so keen on not having an economy that already technically was in recession to go further into recession, that they would give China anything that they wanted. Reminding you again that Biden, for example, lead up to the midterms, released all the strategic petroleum oil supplies just to buy down briefly the cost of gas, so Democrats wouldn't get absolutely destroyed. They do this kind of stuff, right? So, I'm right. So now all of a sudden Trump is like, look, I don't care. I don't care if everybody in the country hates my guts. I'm here until January of 2029. So if you can outlast me, go pound sand. And the best news in the last 24 hours, in my view, is that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, finally, saw light somewhere, a visitation from an angel up high, and came out and said, no, we support Trump. in Trump's tariffs and this deal that's being cooked up in the Senate, we're not even going to take it up. We have the president's back. Right now is the time for unity, people. My gosh, it's almost like people in this country hand-wringing over this might as well be Chinese agents, and I'm not saying that lightly. Okay, quick break here. Bottom of the hour. Lots to go over today. Of course, the SCOTUS decision. Oh my God, I got to get to that next. Don't go anywhere. The What's Right Show will be back in a moment. All right, friends, greetings. Welcome to the What's Right Show. Sam Mirejovsky here, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian. You know the drill. The email, sam@whatsrightshow.com, sam@whatsrightshow.com. So yes, this week am on the road, at least through Thursday. Just a heads up here in the Czech Republic. So a bit of a time difference dealing with that here, some technical issues, but thank you for being patient with the program, and I'm trying to keep on top of things as best as I can, even though I'm just absolutely busy. I only have, technically I have 3 full days here on the ground and a lot to take care of. So it's just, I'm at my limit, folks, but today is better than yesterday because I finally slept. I think that's the worst part of the travel. It's not the 10-hour flight or 12 hours in the air. It's literally the 9-hour time difference, and day is night, night is day. You want to sleep in the mornings, and you can't go to sleep at night. It's just terrible. Okay, I'm done complaining. Now let's talk about the Supreme Court decision, which is fascinating. No, John Roberts is not a conservative. John Roberts is a leftist. He's a statist. He is a Washington, D.C. insider. But he's also not a stupid man. Everything I have told you about this is absolutely spot on. And what I mean by this is that had the Supreme Court, I'm talking about the ruling in the Tren de Aragua deportation flights. So this is the Supreme Court case that blocked the order by Judge Boasberg in the D.C. Circuit Court that prevented the deportation flights of gang members to El Salvador. So this allows Trump to continue expedited removals under the Alien Enemies Act. So the court said the detainees are entitled to notice that they were being removed and an opportunity to challenge their deportations before a federal judge. Okay, whatever. But the point is that Judge Boasberg got his fanny slapped. Now, why is this predictable and why is this all in line with where I was just even a week ago? Judge Roberts is a pragmatist, and he wants to maintain power of the court. And Trump, much in the same way that he has China over a barrel, had the Supreme Court over a barrel. And what is that? Plain and simple, if Judge Roberts, and by the way, it's a 5-4 decision, Amy Coney Barrett, so-called conservative justice on the court, sided with the left-wing lunatics. So all the women on the court, side note, all the female Supreme Court justices all voted basically against the conservatives, so would have wanted Judge Boasberg's order to remain in effect. But look, the decision here, Justice Roberts, he understands that if they rule against Trump, he's just going to continue doing it. And then what? What power does an organization have, any organization have, if it issues a decision or an edict or a proclamation, and the target of that proclamation shrugs his shoulders and says, not going to follow it? The short answer is that entity making that proclamation that is then subsequently ignored loses power, and that power diminishes very rapidly each and every time someone out there who is targeted by their supposed power says, no, I'm not following it, and then there are no consequences. Justice Roberts played this thing out. He realized that if he said, go ahead, yeah, Judge Boasberg, we're going to stop this. Trump, you can't do this. And Trump went basically what he did before. Yeah, I'm going to continue doing it. Then the Supreme Court would be powerless to enforce it. Trump would keep doing it. There would be no enforcement. The Supreme Court would come down against Trump. And then what? Everybody, plain as day, can see that the only ruling that matters is what the executive branch wants to do. And a lot of other things could unravel. Supreme Court decisions about a host of issues could depend wholly on whether or not the President of the United States and his Justice Department want to enforce a certain law or not. This is astonishing if you really step back and think about it. I think Justice Roberts, this is not him being a principled conservative. This is not him, not him looking to protect American borders. This is him going, I have a colorable argument here for allowing Trump to do this. By the way, I think it's more than a wobbler. I mean, I think there's a congressional law. There's this Alien Enemies Act. There's a president acting in accordance with a law that was passed by Congress. It doesn't matter that it was in the 19th or 18th century. That doesn't matter. What matters is that it was a law passed by Congress. The president is acting in accordance with that law. And when the president acts under congressional authorization, he is at the zenith of his political and constitutional power. The Supreme Court only should get involved in very extreme cases, and the standard for review of executive action in those circumstances is very, very high. It's the highest level. So that's where we're at. And people saying, you're going to hear this, it's the stupidest take. People say, well, it's a law that's 200 years old. It's not valid anymore. No, it's a valid law. And more importantly, nobody in the Czech government, nobody in the U.S. government, in the U.S. Congress has any desire to check the president's authority on this. They're not looking to repeal it. So the Speaker of the House hasn't brought to the floor any, legislation that would repeal this act or trim the president's authority back. The Senate hasn't moved to check the president's authority. So what you see here is the Supreme Court really should not get involved in this. But I'm telling you, if it had been a wobbler, so it was Roberts' deciding vote on this. So big news. That is, certainly a big development today. Now, I don't know personally. I don't know how much they're going to run these guys, detainees, through judges. They're going to find a judge somewhere they'll find somebody. But the point, they're going to want to. Trump is motivated to deport these people as fast as he possibly can, because there could be another order that comes through in a different district that, again, for another reason, blocks the president from doing something. And that's what these groups are doing. ACLU, for example, who was represented in this case by Lee Gellert, was accused of and decided, by the way, the Supreme Court decided that they forum shop, that they just picked the circuit in D.C. knowing that the judges there would be favorable to them, but it was not the proper circuit in which to file this case. That was one of the grounds for dismissal. So, but they're going to go to another circuit somewhere where they've got a left-wing, Obama judge or a Biden judge. In some cases, these judges go way back to Clinton era. Hell, Bush, I'm sure. Bush judges are, I'm certain, just as bad. So there it is. I'm just letting you know what's cooking here behind the scenes. It's good. It's all good and predictable that this is how it would go. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right Show will be back in just a moment. All right, folks, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky here. The What's Right Show is on. My email, sam@whatsrightshow.com. Another Supreme Court development, this having to do with a lower court ruling that ordered the Trump administration to rehire 16,000 federal employees again. The Supreme Court ruling in Trump's favor. This is great news. By the way, Jeb Boasberg in the Federal District Court of Washington, D.C., isn't letting go. He's ordered the plaintiffs, the ACLU lawyers, to see if they want to pursue any further claims. So he's already gotten slapped down by the Supreme Court, but he's saying, hey, ACLU lawyers, please tell me, is there anything else that I can use to go against Trump? Is there anything else here? What a clown show. All right, folks, speaking of clowns, I want to circle back to this real fast before I pass over it. We've been so distracted with all the tariffs news, but this had to do with the little kerfuffle. The little situation that occurred with the Signal chat. This was an interesting thing. There's now an explanation for it, and this came out in the Guardian, and I think this to me rings fairly true based on just how this is described. There are 3 people who spoke to the Guardian about this, because there's of course been a significant investigation, as one would expect, where this journalist, right, the Jeffrey Goldberg hack at The Atlantic, ended up on a secure chat with top administration officials. And apparently this is because Goldberg, in his capacity as a hack journalist, emailed the campaign some time back before Trump was president about a story that criticized Trump about his attitude towards service members. Okay. And so they wanted pushback. So the campaign sent his contact info to Walz, who was the national security surrogate, a spokesperson of sorts for the campaign. And then Goldberg apparently, so his email was, forwarded by a Trump spokesman, then Brian Hughes copied and pasted the content of the email, including the signature block, that had Goldberg's phone number, all of his contact info, into a text, and he sends it to Walz. Well, the problem is that Walz saves this Brian Hughes guy's, name to the contact for Goldberg, or in other words, saves Goldberg's, the journalist's, contact info for Brian Hughes, who is an internal guy in the who is now the spokesperson for the NSC, the National Security Council, on the Trump team, and would have been somebody handling messaging, and therefore, a part of the team on this group chat. So an absolute F up, but it doesn't seem that anybody's phone was hacked, or that this was somehow done, as some have suggested, that this was all surreptitious or some kind of skullduggery. I really do. I think this just was a colossal mistake. But my point on this is, have you noticed how this story has completely died? And it's not just because the tariffs came out. Even before Wednesday, this story amounted to nothing. And it's important for us to keep our eyes on the prize. Trump is succeeding in every measurable way. He's got this. And it's always darkest before dawn. This tariff pushback, I keep saying this, a lot of people come out over the weekend, even Trump supporters, thinking that Trump is just losing his mind, and criticizing everything about this. And look, maybe, I don't know. I think the most important thing right now is to stay the course. And I think we're finding out who actually supports Trump and who actually wants to fix this country, and who wants, and the people, and separating those from the people that want business as usual to continue. People, generally speaking, favor business as usual. They do not like disruption, especially when it concerns their personal finances. And the Signal chat, this was a minor issue, really, that the left tried to turn into a major crisis, and they fell flat on their faces. Because by and large, Americans just are sick and tired of being told how terrible Trump is, how incompetent Trump is, how dumb he is, how incompetent he is. So this playbook isn't going to work for the tariff deal. There might be temporary pain. There might be protracted pain in a term of months, but we will come out of this stronger. And when we do, all the naysayers will once again be proven wrong. I'll tell you. Oh, you want an example? Okay, well, let me give you an example of something that people fundamentally don't understand, and even some conservatives that I see, talking on social media and talking on TV and giving opinions about this, and that's the subject of the formula, the tariff, the actual trade deficit formula. Remember when Trump came out with his chart on Wednesday, put up the chart, and people were looking at it. They're like, okay, well, where did these numbers come from? Because these aren't the actual tariff rates. And it's true, they're not the actual tariff rates. And Trump said as much. He said, this is the trade, this is the tariff rate factored in with whatever the trade deficit is for each of these countries. So it's basically a credit, a demanded credit owed to the U.S. for the difference of trade between the two trading partners. And people go, well, I can't figure this out. And there have been a number of people come out saying this formula is complete nonsense. These numbers are gibberish. And nobody sits there. Nobody goes, the point isn't the number. The point is Trump is playing the insane card, right? Or the unreasonable card. He's coming in and going, I think I demand this. I think the trade deficit is this. I think that it's actually 35. I think it's 35% when it's actually, 10. If he started with the real number, he would not be able to get as far as he ultimately will, because when you start low, you get low. He's got to start high to get higher. Anybody who's ever negotiated knows this. You don't come out with your number. Who the hell I want to know how stupid some of these people are. And they have big followings. There are people who are, supposedly very bright. These people are saying, where did Trump find these numbers? These numbers are ridiculous. They're not tied to any reality. It's a negotiation. That's where these numbers came from. Trump made them up. I mean, that could be, but it doesn't matter. He's turning to China and saying, we think the number is here. And what did the Chinese do? Well, they choked. They said, well, we're going to raise you. We're going to raise it. And then Trump goes, well, I'm going to double it. And now we will see who will blink. The calculus, of course, being that ultimately China will have to blink before we do. But I can tell you right now that every other major trade partner of the U.S., or at least most of them, have already come to the table basically offering up a lot. The Japanese made an offer. This is very important. They didn't just say zero tariff. They said we'll do zero tariff and we will commit to buying more American goods. We will commit to fixing the trade deficit. And I, by the way, suspect there's also a refinance of U.S. debt held by the Japanese government. So there is a lot happening behind the scenes that is way over the heads of most people who fundamentally have never been in a negotiation, who probably go to a car dealership and I don't know, get $500 off the car and think they've gotten a deal. So these people have no insight whatsoever, no real world practical experience on how to conduct any kind of a term negotiation, and Trump obviously does. Okay, he is next level on this stuff. And it's what he thrives in. And what you do, I'm telling you, he anchors high with a ridiculous number. And they can scream, they can shout. But guess what? If they believe that Trump thinks that that number is real, how are they going to persuade him? He holds all the cards. And so they have no choice but to negotiate against Trump's fictitious number, even though it very well may be ridiculously high. And everybody out there screaming that Trump ought to accept that he made a mistake and everything. You want him to publicly negotiate against himself? Are you American? Is this your country? Are you fighting for the best deal for the U.S., or are you just so interested in making sure that Orange Hitler is proven wrong? That's, I think, really what this is all about. People are going to be so pissed when Trump wins this, and they will once again disappear and crawl into the crevices and the shadows and pretend like they were right all along. Make me really upset, honestly. All right, Sam Mirejovsky here, News Talk 840 KXNT, the What's Right Show. Will be back in a moment. Folks, all of this is great news. Mark my words, great news. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Actually, things coming around faster than I even imagined. And case in point, by the way, is the Supreme Court here finally finding its way in the dark, deciding to choose to preserve its integrity rather than double down on anti-Trump fervor. Sam Mirejovsky here, News Talk 840 KXNT. Good day in the markets. Things definitely fixing themselves. The reason given, of course, is that the sentiment of investors has gone up with Trump being willing to negotiate. I don't think that's quite it. I think it's because other countries are willing to negotiate. And one of the things that nobody's saying is that even though U.S. markets all around did better today, obviously, than even yesterday, things are rebounding a bit, that even though that's occurring, you still have markets around the world where they're down in the last 24 hours, in the last trading day, down by as much as 10%. This proves a very important point that Trump right now is at an apex, of his presidential power. And I saw this. This was CNN did a piece on this where they did some polling and then looked at the math of it, and it was fascinating, of course, because look, I mean they did. They got into it. And I've got it loaded here. I'm gonna play this in just a moment. Harry Enton, who's a data guy, looking at Trump, and this is just recent polling, right? With all of this unfolding, what do people think about Trump and his use of his presidential authority? This was this morning on CNN with Kate Baldwin. And Harry Enton says, look, his executive orders, he's using more executive orders than any other president in this time in presidential history.
I think there was this concern among some folks that Donald Trump would come in for a second term and kind of be a lame duck. He ain't no lame duck. If anything, he's a soaring eagle. What am I talking about here? Let's talk about Trump executive orders in 2025. He's already signed 111 so far. That is the most at this point in a presidency in at least 100 years. In fact, it's the most in any single year, and we're only in April, since Harry S. Truman in the early 1950s. The bottom line is whether you like Trump or you don't like him, you can't say that he's come in and not try to deliver on what he at least believes was his promises on the campaign trail, and he's doing so in historic fashion.
Yes, and by the way, two of those executive orders now validated by the Supreme Court of the United States and counting. Right, we're on it. Right, the Supreme Court is starting to clean up the mess finally of the lower courts, and siding with Trump. So look, I mean, this is, and this is an observation. It's a numerical fact. They're going through the data on that. Now the question is, how do people relate to this? What's Trump's approach to power? A lot of people say it's different. Now, I remember, if you follow the mainstream media, their narrative, right? The story here that we're all supposed to buy is that Trump is Orange Hitler and he's a fascist and he's doing some sort of a power grab that is at odds with our Constitution and our sense of democracy. Okay? And I will tell you, I think I don't know if people are entirely convinced of that. So here's what people are saying about Trump's power. Is it different? Is it the same as previous presidents? Listen to what Harry Enton had to say.
How are people reacting to and feel about Trump's approach?
Yeah, okay. So Trump's approach here, what are we talking about? Trump's approach to presidential power. I think the American people recognize what he's doing here is completely different. We're talking, get this, 86% of the American public believes that Trump's approach to presidential power is completely different from past presidents, compared to only 14% who believe it is in line with precedent. And we're talking about at least 79% of Democrats, independents, and Republicans. So again, you can agree or you can disagree with Donald Trump, but what you can't disagree with is that he's doing things very differently. I have used the Frank Sinatra quote before. He is doing it, quote unquote, my way, and that is what Donald Trump has done throughout both of his presidential terms, and he's certainly doing that, Kate Baldwin, in term number 2.
Yes, and by the way, we're loving it. Side note, because one thing that Donald Trump's supporters and voters did not want is for Trump to enter his second term and to let himself get steamrolled the way he did in his first. You know, I remember in 2015, early supporter, obviously, of Trump's, and you know, and by the way, interestingly, I've shared this a few times. I'm one of about 700 or so people who gave to him the limit, the max, in his first quarter as a candidate. Actually, I think that number is even lower. Robbie, you have to remind me. I have it written down somewhere. It was not 1,000. It was very few people in the beginning that gave Trump the max. I was one of them. And what I loved is basically everything that he said. My only fear, I remember this in 2016 when he won. I said, well, I just hope he meant it. Now, I remember after Trump was, in office a couple of years, and we weren't getting what we wanted. And I was in the midst of, doing my show out in LA, and, Ann Coulter already had publicly split from Trump, criticizing him, saying it was all talk. I never believed that. I just was frustrated that he had been sabotaged. And then I thought that maybe he had gotten in his own way on some stuff, but I never once doubted that Trump was a true believer, and that his campaign messaging was not in line with his true beliefs. So for what I wanted the second term, I said, okay, it's proven to me that he's got a hell of a fight in him. Now I want him to take the fight into the presidency. And when I would speak to many of you and, emails during the campaign, I know a lot of you folks out there feel exactly the same way that I do. And that I think the only fear we all had was that Trump was going to come in and go, okay. Now, I didn't think that. I think that by the time the lawfare rolled out in earnest, that Trump was pissed off to the max and that he was going to come in breathing fire. Well, he certainly has. And the point is that Americans, per CNN here, Harry Enton talking to Kate Baldwin, is saying, yes, Trump has and is using executive power in a way that is completely different from past presidents. Now, the question is, do people like it? Do people support it? Because if you're attending one of those fake, paid for, anti-Elon Musk, anti-Trump, stop the billionaires or whatever it is, the protests that are happening across the country, A common refrain there is, of course, that Trump is a fascist, that we have to stop fascism, which, one would presume inherently suggests that there is a popular uprising against Trump's use of presidential power. Well, I would caution these people that they are not in line with a majority of the country and how they feel.
Take it a step further. Do the people think he has too much? He's taken too much power.
Yeah, this I think is the real question, right? You can believe that he's doing stuff completely differently, but do you think that he has a little too much power or not? And this is interesting. So Trump's presidential power is too much, the right amount, too little. Well, 47% say too much, but then you get 36% who say the right amount. Then you get 17% who say too little. So you're essentially dealing with a majority of the American public, 53%, who do not say that Trump has too much power. They either says he has too little power or the right amount of power. So the idea, that argument that Donald Trump is, quote unquote, a king, that I don't think holds with the American people. It does hold maybe with 47%, but with the majority of folks, they believe Donald Trump's doing something completely differently, and they don't believe he has too much power, and the executive orders he signed certainly suggest he's no lame duck. He is, as I said at the beginning, a soaring eagle.
One of the things that makes Chief Justice Roberts such a terrible Supreme Court judge is that I think he actually pays attention to these polls. See, to me, the Supreme Court ought to rule on the merits of every case. And it's not a Republican-Democrat issue. It's not a right or left issue. It's a constitutional, if it is a constitutional matter, which is, subject matter jurisdiction for the Supreme Court, then these cases ought to be decided based on their constitutional merits. End of story. But Roberts many times picks winners and losers based on his desire to protect the reputation of the court, which is why when Obamacare was still popular and why Americans still broadly, by some small percentage wanted it, he contorted himself into a legal pretzel to call Obamacare a tax, say that Congress has the power to tax, even though they never called it a tax. It never was said to be a tax. Anyway, you know the story. Sebelius, big case, saying yes to Obamacare, and he was the tie-breaking vote there. So I think actually, right, America has been dying for some order. And Trump has come along and said, all right, the leftists won't give you order. I will give you order. I will reclaim American sovereignty. I will remove illegal aliens. I will put my foot down and make things happen. I will right-size the government. I will root out waste and fraud. And this has all been met with a tremendous amount of resistance, but now endorsed by the courts. And the American people say, this is good. I'm just letting you know, I think that the Supreme Court, unfortunately, Justice Roberts is looking at these same polls and is making judicial judgments based on political expediency. And just because he's on the right side of some of these votes doesn't mean that he's on the right side for the right reasons. He's a dangerous guy, by the way. I really do. I think a complete Washington snake. Chief Justice John Roberts, my goodness. All right, Sam Mirejovsky here, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam & Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right.
The Sam & Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
One of the most incredible things, folks, is that the Trump administration is able to tackle so many things at once. And I think it's creating a problem for the media and for the haters, the opposition forces. They don't even know what to tackle. Welcome back. What's Right show here, powered by Sam & Ash Injury Law. I, Sam Mirejovsky, your host, also known as Nevada's favorite recovering Californian, reporting for duty. So, we got the tariff war happening, and incidentally covered some of the wins there. They continue to rack up. Meanwhile, of course, the Doge team continuing to tackle government waste, efficiency, fixing Social Security, Medicare, other entitlement programs that are rife with waste, but in the process, also finding out that the immigration system, that how it was reworked again by executive order by Team Biden, who knows, the auto pen, it wasn't even Biden doing any of this, decided to basically begin by executive order legalizing and giving amnesty to, essentially, to illegals. And it was all in an effort to get them to vote, at the very least, to count in the census, so that blue states could increase their congressional representation. Now, Antonio Gracias, who spoke at the Wisconsin town hall with Elon Musk, he's on the Doge team. He's a very wealthy guy, successful businessman. And by the way, I understand, I think a lifelong Democrat, was an Obama supporter, is absolutely starting to sound like he was bitten by the red bug, because here he is describing what they found when they were going through Social Security and led all the way to basically voter fraud. Listen to Gracias explain this.
1.3 million of them are on Medicaid right now. And we looked at the voter rolls and we found that thousands of them are registered to vote in a handful of states. I mean, it is shockingly bad. And this is the tip of the iceberg, guys. We mapped the system from enumeration, so I get your number, all the way to the end, went to the offices and saw how the offices operate. And in that process, one of our engineers found this data called enumeration beyond entry. It had this giant ramp to it. And that just jumped out at us. And we're like, what is that? And so we dug into it. What happened was this program was designed for people that we want to let in, like the CARE program, which are the Afghans. They would be in this number. What jumped out at us wasn't that this is here because it has legitimate use. It's the growth. Why did it grow this fast? That's what we dug into. What we find here is that a legitimate program was, the word I'll use, abused. So they allowed people that were illegals at the border to come in legally. They were giving people at times notices to appear. And what that allows you to do is come in the country and then you're scheduled a court date, which is like 6 years out. 6 years out is the average, by the way. It could be longer than that. And while you're waiting for your court date, you could fill out an asylum application. Once the application's in, you can file another form, 765, to get a work authorization. Once you get that, you get a 766, and we automatically send you a Social Security card in the mail. No interview at all. That is the majority of the growth you see in these numbers. We found that every benefit program we looked at was being accessed by these people. 1.3 million of them are on Medicaid right now, today. And by the way, it's just ramping, it's just starting. And we looked at the voter rolls and we found that thousands of them are registered to vote in a handful of states. And then we went even further with those friendly states and found that many of those people had actually voted. It was shocking to us. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. And this is the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. And it's in the data, and it's a system, a loophole that was hacked by Team Biden. This was apparently something that was permissible in some narrow circumstances, but all of a sudden, right, he saw that it was a handful of people year over year, and the number just shot up. They just gave you a Social Security number, and then people went and voted. And the Democrats would have continued this had Kamala Harris won. They would have kept this going until we were a one-party rule country. They wouldn't have stopped until the entire United States of America would have turned into a California. You want to see one-party rule? Look at these blue states. Look at the blue states that have a legislature, that have a governor, that have, their main cities are all run by Democrats. These are not places where you want to walk at night. These are not places that you want to be as a woman alone, let's say, even at sometimes during the day. This is not a place you want to have a business. This is not where you want to be if you're working hard for your money. It's not where you want to own any property. You're going to get hit with huge property taxes and everybody can come in and steal your stuff with near zero repercussions. So that's the reality here. And look, I mean, and what does the left have? What is the coherent counter argument to all of this? I mean, AOC banging on about how we got to stop the oligarchy. I mean, that's not real, right? That's not real. That's not a real. And then we've got Jasmine Crockett, member of Congress, colleague of AOC. Is she part of the squad? Well, probably not yet. She's working. She's auditioning her way for it. Here's what she said about immigration, and oh my gosh.
So I had to go around the country and educate people about what immigrants do for this country, or the fact that we are a country of immigrants.
Right.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. Okay, so I'm lying. Raise your hand. You're not. We done picking cotton. We are. You can't pay us enough to find a plantation.
None of this is even coherent. But there, my friends, is the future of the Democratic Party. This is why they got nothing. And this is why they have to resort to fraud to make us believe that their movement is popular. By the way, I've got some receipts on that, too. Stay tuned. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Rarely wrong, always right. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. Today, I think a little bit better out there economically. See, it's going to work out. See, Trump isn't just an idiot and a blithering fool. See, Scott Bessent is one of the most brilliant and capable people to hold the position of Treasury Secretary in a long time. And most importantly, he's practical. He's got practical knowledge. This is not some university president who stepped out of academia to take a job in the administration. So this is what this is what I think. So by the way, let me tell you, speaking of me being fairly right most of the time, these protesters have been talking about this. I shared the GPS data yesterday for the Chicago protest. Just one example where 88% of the people there, about 38,000 people total, that apparently they're, it wasn't even that many, was it? I have to look back at the data. I have it here. I know this. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, 7,500 mobile devices, not 35. What am I talking about? There you go. See, I had to correct myself. I knew it wasn't that high. 92% of them, though, not 88, 92% attended 5 or more Kamala Harris rallies, which means these guys are professional Democrats to go around and do this stuff. We know how the campaign worked things. There's a reason why they ended up millions of dollars in debt and blowing through nearly $1.5 billion, because they literally had to pay people to even listen to Kamala Harris and her insufferable cackle. Well, they found a nice person here who apparently was willing to go on the record. This is Saturday in one of the anti-Elon, hands off my government rallies, WBTV Charlotte in North Carolina, talked to this worker. And this is interesting. Listen.
I'm concerned about the cuts to veteran care, to Social Security. I worked in Eastern Europe and was told to come home after the president put a 90-day hold on all foreign aid and assistance a couple of months ago.
This is the USAID money floating out there. So this guy was went from organizing color revolutions in Europe, went from being a paid taxpayer-funded agitator, right? Countering popular movements across Europe, for example, the AfD in Germany, Viktor Orban's government in Hungary, the Geert Wilders movement, the PVV party in the Netherlands. I could go on, right? This was what the taxpayer dollars, and this guy's just casually talking. Yeah, I got back from Europe, out there working for the government, and it's almost like you pass by the line. It seems innocuous. Okay, so he was stationed in Europe. This is what we were doing. We had these leftist propagandists. And worse than propagandists, they were organizers. They were doing abroad what they ended up doing here, and I'm convinced of it, on January 6th. By the way, Robbie, I just saw some video here. Again, feds getting dressed up on the morning of January 6th. And, I'm gonna wait to corroborate it and look at it and, verify it. But I have to tell you, there is, to me, there's just the overwhelming evidence. I want to see Kash Patel. Never mind the Nashville shooter. I understand. By the way, I talked to Alan Stock about that this morning, and Megyn Kelly Kash Patel via Megyn Kelly released the more of the manifesto and all the stuff. And what's my takeaway? My takeaway is it's obvious now why Team Biden played hide the ball on that stuff. Biden was so keenly interested, the Department of Justice under Biden, to make every narrative about terrorism, not about Islam, not about leftists, not about anything. They wanted to make it all about right-wing extremism. And it became a real push after January 6th. Makes me almost think that January 6th, the purpose behind it, in fact, was twofold. One, to give the government pretext to go after a political movement that they viewed as an existential threat to the deep state. And of course, two, it being an opportunity to further then go after and paint a picture of that every right-winger, whether they're allied with MAGA or not, Trump supporter or not, that every right-winger deserves to be, surveilled by the police state. And so anything that fell outside of that narrative didn't get talked about. We didn't want to talk about the Pulse nightclub shooting. The FBI didn't want to get into that. We didn't get into this. We didn't get into what happened in Nashville, right? Because now it's obvious that this young lady had her mind rotted from inside out by this woke ideology and turned violent. But it was domestic terrorism. And it was the result, of course, of a radical leftist ideology. And I'll also add a side note to it, right? That this, and I'm talking, of course, about the release of documents here of some of the journal entries and other info that's finally made its way out, starting to make its way out. And I hope we have further disclosures for all this stuff from the FBI, from Kash Patel. But this is, to me, it's also, and I want to get into this, these drugs that are used already on kids that are emotionally suffering, that perhaps have, mental issues, drugs like Leupride that are, have previous to the gender movement, the trans movement, were used only in extreme cases and limited cases for kids with precocious puberty. These puberty blockers, right? These are not safe drugs, and they have psychological side effects. And so nobody wants to talk about that either. And it's, I think, a part of the story. So at any rate, this is it. I'm convinced that when Kash Patel gets to releasing all the stuff and getting to January 6th, I mean, that is going to break people's minds when they find out the real story there. I'm convinced of it. I'll stake everything I've got on it. It's just absolutely out there. Okay. So, by the way, the White House right now is absolutely delighted by how things are going. I've got all these people reaching out to me. What the hell is Trump doing? What's going on? I mean, look, people support Trump. His numbers may dip. He doesn't care, by the way. He knows he's doing the right thing. He's getting progress. He's getting results where other presidents haven't. And on top of it, he's winning at the Supreme Court. And it's Stephen Miller went on Hannity yesterday, and I love that this was for Miller, who is in charge of immigration policy for the Trump administration. Was an absolute victory lap, well-deserved.
This was a huge, a monumental victory for President Trump. The biggest legal win of this administration so far. A total embarrassment for crazy Judge Boasberg, who's been trying to force this president to bring foreign alien terrorists back onto American soil, trying to turn our planes around, trying to empty prisons in foreign countries and bring them back to our soil. This is a monumental, colossal victory for the rule of law, for the Constitution, for our founding generation, John Adams, who signed this law into effect in 1798, and for President Trump in fulfilling his mandate and campaign pledge. What does this mean for you and your family watching at home tonight? It means that the Department of Justice, FBI, DEA, ATF, the U.S. Marshal Service, Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement now have maximum authority to find and remove illegal alien gang members from Venezuela that have been responsible for so much misery in this country, for the torture and murder of Jocelyn Nungary, for the brutal slaying of Laken Riley. Those monsters can now be hunted down and expelled from this country with speed, force, and efficiency. This is a great day for America.
Absolutely. And by the way, reports have that it was Stephen Miller that came up with this novel idea that this is how they would do it, that they would just quickly grab people and with very little fuss or muss, send them out of the country, send them out of the U.S., and send them to a separate jurisdiction and justify it using this particular law. This was something that the Trump administration did not do in its first term, but admittedly, of course, the immigration issue was not nearly as dire as it got under 4 years of Joe Biden. This is popular, okay? This is what people want. Nobody wants violent, criminal, illegal aliens roaming about the United States of America. And that's precisely what Joe Biden gave us, all while he was drooling out of the corner of his mouth. By the way, that's another story that we need to get to the bottom of. There's so much here to be peeled back, folks. Needs to happen, but all in due time. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right. What's up? Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Okay, friends, here in Prague still will be through Thursday, so it's going to be some busy times for me ahead. I hope I can do the show every day. I'm going to do my absolute best. I think Thursday probably will not be able to get to it, and hoping tomorrow I can. But certainly back in the saddle in Las Vegas on Friday. Thank you for your patience. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law, 702-820-1234, because you deserve what's right. Speaking of Biden's cognitive decline, I just mentioned this last segment. Ronnie Jackson, who was used to be Trump's doctor in his first term, he is now a representative, House of Representatives member from Texas, said this to Laura Ingraham about Biden's, well, lack of faculties. I still think this is a huge story, and it's going to be a problem for the people that facilitated this.
We have to look back at what happened during the 4 years of the Biden administration, and we can never let this happen again. We had a shadow presidency for most of that presidency. There was a massive cover-up that was led by Jill Biden and Dr. Kevin O'Connor and some of the people that were closest to him as chief of staff.
Jeffrey Zients.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
John Kirby.
Klein. All of these people.
Goes on
yeah.
and on.
On and on.
But now they're in books saying, I was worried about him.
Sure. Yeah.
I was shocked during his debate prep.
Yeah.
He seemed to tire after 25 minutes. Are you buying any of that?
I'm not buying any of that. They knew this was going on. The whole world
covering
could see
up
it.
the cover-up?
Yeah, I was saying it when he was candidate Joe Biden back in 2020 when he was running, that this man's not cognitively fit to be our commander-in-chief and our head of state. And they knew it. And now the books are proving that they knew it back then. They just kept their mouths shut. They covered it up, and they lied to the American people. He was auto-penning everything he was signing. Who was running the country, Laura? Who? We don't know.
But these protesters we just covered, they're like, well, this is what democracy looks like. They're screaming. Is that what democracy looked like for them?
I don't know. We're going to find out, though. I hope we have whistleblowers that are coming forward. I hope they're going to tell us what's going on. But we are absolutely going to haul some people before Congress, and they're going to explain themselves. The American people can never let this happen again.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. Do you remember when Joe Biden was sitting there at the Maui fires? He went on Air Force One. He flies all the way from Washington, D.C. to Hawaii. I don't know if they stopped anywhere. I think Air Force One can make it direct that far. Maybe they refueled in the air. I don't know. But my point is, it's a long flight. I get it. 6 time zones. But let's be honest. Joe Biden, as president, gets to fly in Air Force One. He's got a bed. He's got a chef. He's got a doctor with him. He's got full staff. He travels in a way that most people never will in their lives. When he got there, do you remember that meeting that he had with the fire victims somewhere on the ground in Maui? I don't remember where it was, but he looked like he was embalmed. Only the embalmer messed up, and his eyes still were like open for some of the time. Some of the time he actually took a nap. But he looked bad. And again, I keep coming back to this as a refrain, as a thought to come back to over and over again, which is, the left wants to sell you on BS and tell you, trust me, I'm an expert. Or, don't listen to me, but the experts say X, Y, Z. And I always approach every problem, and you should too, based on what does your common sense tell you, right? There are observable things out there that you can make determinations on based on your eyes, your ears, your senses, and your good judgment. When it came to Biden, it was observable to anybody willing to admit it to themselves that he was not doing well. When it came to COVID, it was observable that a lot of what was being told us to do, or else, Sam, you're going to kill grandma, that it wasn't true, even though the experts said do it. On this tariff business, I have a certain gut sense of this. Now, do I understand everything about economics and about bonds and about equities? No, I don't. I'm the first to admit it. But I have good common sense, and I understand enough about human nature, and I've observed enough about China and their political system and our system and trade and products and about how things work, and I'm making a certain educated, forecast on what I think will happen. And oftentimes the experts are at odds with what I think. Or put another way, I'm disagreeing with the experts. But the experts get it wrong all the time. And so to answer Ronnie Jackson here on the subject of Biden, everybody sat around and were like, no, there's no problem. It's no problem. And we heard from people who were, who had this expertise, or even Biden's doctor himself going, oh, yep, no problem. I examined the president and he's A-okay. And then along comes, who is it? Jake Tapper at CNN, who decides he's going to write a book and make some money and capitalize on the cover-up he helped perpetuate. Coming out with a book on the decline and on the cover-up as if he had nothing to do with it. I mean, this is almost, Jake Tapper's. It's like OJ writing, if I did it. But what is really an admission of? It's an admission of that they lie to us all the time and cover and wrap it in a packaging of credentials. And credentials don't mean anything. In fact, credentials are wildly overrated. Climate change, there's another credential. Does it even matter anymore? It doesn't, plain and simple. People with credentials have ideologies. And people with ideologies will shape, shift, and move their, and deny observable, fact just to fit that ideology. Beware of ideology, especially when it's trying to pretend that it has some sort of a presumption of correctness. All right, friends, got to wrap it here. Beautiful show. Great to be here with you this Tuesday. I will be back tomorrow, 1 p.m. here, same bat channel, same bat time. Okay, Sam at what'srightshow.com is my email. On Twitter, on X, at what'srightsam. Be well out there and despair not. We got this.